Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. This podcast strives to bring you the best medical advice right to your favorite listening device. This is the smartest doctor in the room, and I'm your host, Dr. Dean Mitchell. Today in New York, it's a beautiful wintry day, and we got the snow coming down a little bit. I hope everybody's in a safe place and warm. And we have actually a very interesting topic today. As you all know, when we start the new year, we make a lot of New Year resolutions, and one of them is, in a lot of the cases, to lose some weight. And today I'm going to be talking with an expert to talk about some of the new weight loss drugs, which I'm sure most of you are all hearing about. They're the whole craze. We see all the celebrities using them, and, we have to find out if they're safe or not. Obesity has become an epidemic in our culture, for children as well as adults. And unfortunately, obesity also has social implications as well as medical ones. A lot of times we hear these horrible remarks, oh, that person, he's fat and lazy. You never hear about a person who's skinny and lazy. I'm sure there are plenty of those. But in truth, being overweight is complicated by genetics, hormonal imbalance, quality of food that we eat. And the holy grail in lifestyle medicine has been to find a magic diet or a pill that will help many of us control our weight and not starve ourselves like a supermodel. Weight loss drugs in the past have come and gone, mainly because of dangerous side effects that led to lawsuits and having them taken off the market. But now in 2024, there is a lot of hype about a new class of drugs for weight loss. They are, I guess, generically called these semi-glutenide medications, and they appear to work by limiting a person's appetite. These medications were originally approved and still are for type 2 diabetes. But now, again, a lot of you are noticing when you see some of your favorite celebrities who were maybe a little bit overweight before, you can almost notice by how they look that they're taking these medications, which they're taking on an off-label basis and paying a lot of money for. My guest today, Dr. Philip Rabito, is a Manhattan endocrinologist and the assistant clinical professor at Mount Sinai, who regularly treats in his practice patients with obesity, and he's got a lot of experience with these new medications. So I'm really interested to find out, as I hope you are. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Philip Rabito to the podcast.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So let's start out with this. There has been for now decades a lot of information on how to eat healthy. Why do you think, in your years of practice, that obesity is such a problem? I mean, is it the lack of movement? Is it the quality of food? What's your sort of gestalt on this?
There's so many reasons for it. Obviously, we become more industrialized. A lot of us have sedentary lives, so the quality of the food is different. And weight loss is something that is very difficult for the long term. Pretty much anyone can lose 10 or 15 pounds in the short term. The practice of weight loss medicine is challenging in getting patients to lose that weight and keeping it off. So I think the caloric restriction it takes and the sacrifice it takes to lose weight is the biggest challenge to our population.
So do you think a lot of it, again, people get blamed for this, do you think a lot of it is mental? Again, what's happened with some of these drugs that we're going to get into, a lot of people say, it's not mental, it's, some people are just kind of born like this. Their genetics, predispose them, and they have other family members. So, I know, again, in your career over the years, when you have seen people before these drugs who've been able to maintain weight loss, what's your sense of, that did these people become extreme exercisers? Did they really make, sort of sustainable long-term changes to their eating habits?
Yeah, sure. So there is a genetic component. Obviously, we're all blessed with a certain metabolism, so you can't compare yourself to the next person.
Right.
And well, that person eats X, and they're able to maintain their weight. Everyone's different. So you're blessed with your metabolism. Of course, there are metabolic issues that can have one person hold weight and make it more difficult to lose weight. Hypothyroidism, Cushing's disease. And certain vitamin deficiencies, but by and large, we all have the opportunity to lose weight. A lot of it is just lifestyle and adopting a certain practice that is doable for the long term. the medicines have sort of revolutionized how we look at weight loss, because what they've done, at least in my practice, is they've helped people to be able to adapt to a lifestyle, at least be able to learn a lifestyle. And, for me, in my practice, the lifestyle is the main crux of the weight loss. The medicines out there are able, just as an adjunct, to let the patient, learn to understand that they can control themselves, and it gives them a sense of control. And when the first few pounds come off, it becomes like a psychiatric medicine. A lot of the anxiety and the depression and then the guilt that goes with eating is taken away, and patients feel like they can regain control, and they're able to be able to make the sacrifices. And then, I try to get my patients closer to their target weight, and then we talk about what to do with the medicines for the long term. But in my practice, no one gets medicines for weight loss without having some sort of a plan or some sort of an approach dietarily and lifestyle.
That makes a lot of sense. Justin, you bring up an interesting issue too, because obviously this, people's weight, it's hard to determine what is exactly overweight for somebody. Is it 10 pounds? Is it 20 pounds? There was a very famous cardiologist, George Sheehan, who was part of the running movement. And one of the things he said interesting in his book, when he felt, obviously back even in the 70s or 80s, people were gaining too much weight. He says, you should really be about your high school or college weight, which I think a lot of us find very hard, because it seems like every decade or so, 4 or 5 pounds comes on and doesn't want to leave. So when you're assessing a patient in your office, how do you, let's say a person walks in, and I'll just give you an example there. Okay, let's use Dr. Dean Mitchell here. Dr. Dean Mitchell walks into your office and says, Dr. Rabito, I'm a patient of yours. I'm 5'11" and a half. I got to put that half in there. I now weigh about 173 pounds on a good day. I mean, I was a tennis player, and when I was in high school, I weighed about 135 pounds, 140 pounds. Probably in college, 145, 50. And now, obviously, being in practice 30 years, it's taken its toll on me. So how do you determine? Do you go by the body mass index? I mean, do you ask the patients, do they think that they're, overweight? How do you make that important assessment?
Yeah, I mean, if you look epidemiologically in animal models, I mean, thinner models, thinner patients do better long haul. Cardiovascular risk reduction, obviously, to control less risk of diabetes, less risk of cancer. So if you look epidemiologically, different studies, Okinawans and other populations that are generally thinner, they live longer, all right? And they're happier, and in general as a population. When I risk stratify my patient, when I come up with a target weight, I always ask my patient what they'd like to be. And invariably, they will tell me a number that's probably 20 pounds higher than they can ultimately achieve. Okay. How I decide their weight is, of course, I use the BMI as my guideline.
Is that sort of like the MetLife tables, or is that's separate? Because remember, MetLife used to have the
tables. I mean, that is generally considered ideal weight, and that was for actuarial and I think that's generally been it's not used as often. I think BMI. So BMI is the most accurate in the absence of pregnancy and bodybuilders with dense musculature. BMI is typically
is that measured through a machine these days, or your scale can actually do it? How do you?
I mean the BMI. I mean, I have an in-body machine, but very very simply, it's a height and weight. You just plug those into a formula.
You put it into the formula. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what about also, as you know, too, there's different body types. I remember, it's really funny. When I was in medical school, I had this really good South African anatomy professor. And I remember him talking about, it was based on this guy, Dr. Sheridan, who was originally from Colombia. He had the 3 different types called the endomorph, ectomorph, and mesomorph. And the way I tell patients, I have them take their forefinger and thumb and wrap it around their wrists. And it actually determines what's your body and bone structure. Does that play a little bit of a role too? I mean, some people are just kind of, thicker than others, They're not going to have that. They're not going to have that slim body really ever. So why try?
There are different frames, and people who tend to be mesomorphic tend to be more muscular, and you understand that having more muscle is generally denser. So yeah, I mean, I consider that, but I typically use the BMI as what I go for, and I come up with a target weight for the patient, and I also risk stratify the patient cardiovascular wise. So I want to know,
looking at their cholesterol and triglycerides.
I mean,
blood
unfortunately,
sugar.
cholesterol is not something you can make such a huge impact on. At least the LDL, you can drop the triglycerides with significant lifestyle, but the LDL is more genetically driven and produced endogenously by the liver.
Right.
It's driven by your genetics. But certainly hemoglobin A1C, sugar, you can make a huge impact in patients who have sleep apnea. And reduce the risk of heart failure and that population. Blood pressure is something I routinely pull people off their blood pressure medicines one after another.
Really?
Weight loss, it's incredibly sensitive to weight loss. The blood pressure drops.
Interesting.
So I think it's important not only to come up with a target weight aesthetically for where the patient would like to be, but also to risk stratify them and try to get the maximum amount of weight loss that will get them to get their cardiovascular risk factors closer to target.
Very good. Let me ask you about the weight loss programs, because actually we're seeing on TV a lot too that Noom and I don't know, was it Golo, all these things, and for forever there's been Weight Watchers. Now and of course there was the Atkins diet I've done, and the Zone diet. I've interviewed Barry Sears on the podcast before. But, I wanted to ask your opinion about the types of foods. Now, what always struck me as strange was Weight Watchers, from what I know, I never was involved with it, but that it was sort of based on this point system and how many calories you ate. Although the foods looked ridiculous, like they were letting you have chocolate cake and little pieces of lasagna, I guess for comfort level. And then on the other extremes, the Atkins, the Sears, they were all like, stay with protein, low carb. What do you usually recommend to your patients that you're working with, whether it's with medications or without, as far as a diet? How do you approach that?
Yeah, Dean, it's a great question. In my opinion, and from what the literature supports, structure is so important. So the patient needs to have some structure. So something like Weight Watchers gives that patient that structure. They need something to follow, basically. And just winging it and counting calories. I mean, study after study has shown that counting calories and weighing food is not a long-term solution. It's just too much sacrifice. Okay. So I like more structured programs like fasting, longer fasts, right? In regards to the keto diet, I'm not a huge fan of ketosis. In regards to adding fat to the diet, right? So the Mediterranean diet, for instance, is a fantastic diet. It's widely considered, the best diet in the world, but it's rich in fat. And for people who are looking for overall cardiovascular health, of course, it's got its advantages, but it's also high in fat and high in grains. Grains will certainly cause insulin release and fat deposition. Carbohydrate intake in general increases the pancreas to make insulin. Insulin causes fat to be deposited. So triglycerides that are in the blood in the presence of insulin after a carbohydrate meal will push that triglyceride with fat into the fat cells. So one of the tenets that I like in my practice is prolonged fasts, in which the patient is not eating carbohydrates for long periods of time. I'm talking 24 hours twice a week.
Wow.
And in which case their body simply isn't making insulin. So not only is there obviously caloric restriction 2 days of the week, but there's also a change in the hormonal milieu in such that the insulin, there's no insulin for that long period of time. And without insulin, very simply, you can't store fat efficiently. So in my estimation, and what science has supported, is that it's not just caloric restriction, but it's also limiting carbohydrates. And that seems, from anecdotally speaking, from my experience, has been the most successful way for patients to lose weight. And most importantly, Dean, to keep it off, right?
So how often, it's interesting, because I interviewed the longevity expert, Dr. Longo from USC. He was very big on these short fast. Well, he called it fasting, but it was basically very low calorie, like for 3 or 4 days. And he had a special program with packets, because he does a lot of research on longevity. So you're saying that's what you do with your patients? You'll say to them, pick one day out of the week, and I want you to do a 24-hour fast?
Yeah, depending on the patient, even sometimes 2 days of the week, right? And there's
how can they do that? I mean, and when you say fasting, you're saying are you saying not eating at all, just having drinking, or are you saying like a low calorie, or?
Yes. So fasting, I mean to calories, right? So I typically have them go 24 hours without a calorie, and then I'll have them break their fast with a meal that contains no carbohydrate. So essentially, they're going up to 24 hours without a calorie.
Wow, that's got to be really tough, though. Is it? I mean,
It's tough in the beginning, and then
and then they get used to it.
the patients get used to it. So ketosis is when you ingest fat or you oxidize fat. You use fat as a source of fuel. For instance, in the keto diet, there's a process called ketosis where fat is oxidized and used as your source.
Yeah.
And there are byproducts of fatty oxidation, beta hydroxybutyric acetoacetate. And these have been shown to be beneficial in animal models, and potentially it's being studied in human models to be associated with longevity because they have positive metabolic effects. So instead of doing the keto diet, where you're adding fat to the diet, the fasting promotes ketosis by breaking down your own endogenous fat, which is your fat that's stored through fasting. So you're getting a similar effect, and you're raising ketone levels and thus the byproducts of the ketones, and you're potentially getting that cardiovascular metabolic advantage from doing that. So this is still something that's being studied, but it's
I interviewed also Andre Mikkelsen. I don't know if you know him. He's from Germany. He's really a very interesting guy. He's written 2 books, The Nature Cure, The Fasting Fix. A really legitimate, super researcher, doctor. And, they have like special clinics apparently in Germany where people go in to do fasting for diseases. A lot of like psoriasis and a lot of arthritis conditions. And so how do you bring them out of the fast? Because I know even, I'm Jewish, and when I go like on the Jewish holidays in September and I fast, I'm dying that day. When I come out of it, the thing I always have to be so careful about is breaking the fast because, either sometimes you tend to overeat, and then you feel even worse. So do you have like a certain plan for the patients? A specific kind of meal, because I'm sure they're ravenous at that point.
Absolutely. At that point, they're chewing on their arm after 24 hours. Calorie. But so the difference between maybe a religious fast and a fast like this is that you're hydrating. And one of the reasons why people feel fatigued and they get the dizziness and the nausea from the ketosis is they're not flushing. They're not getting enough hydration.
Got it. Oh, interesting.
With this fast, patients are drinking black coffee, no milk, right? It's
interesting. Okay.
They're drinking water, they're drinking tea, and they're going 24 hours without a calorie. And then how they break their fast, staying to, the theme is to break their fast without a carbohydrate. And this is something that
And what would that be? Like, can you give me an example? What would be a typical?
Chicken and broccoli, and you can eat as much as you want. And I go over this in detail with my patients in my practice, and gets it correct the first time, but it's not that complicated. But it's difficult to do. It's easy to understand. And then there's no eating until the next morning, basically. So you're going 24 hours without a calorie, but essentially you're going 30 some odd hours without the opportunity to carbohydrate. As such, your body is not seeing insulin for 30 some odd hours.
Yeah, that's got to be the key. I think it's one of the things that Atkins really contributed to the understanding of like weight loss.
You can say what you want about the fatty meats, but it was him just basically was the first one
to promote about the insulin response. Yeah, it's interesting. I was on a podcast once with Dr. Stephen Gundry. I don't know if you know him. He's kind of written some popular books. He is a cardiothoracic surgeon out in California, I think at Loma Linda. And, he ended up saying how he got into nutrition because he started to develop diabetes, hypertension. He was about 40, 50 pounds overweight. And he kind of did his own deep dive to help himself. And actually I was on the podcast with him and he was like, kind of rail thin. But we were talking on the podcast and then even privately, I found it a little shocking what he did. He essentially ate within a 2-hour window every day. That was his thing, and I was like, this is not doable for me, again, he would, and I think he was pretty liberal with what he was eating. He had all his things that had the good fats and everything in it, but literally he would eat between, and because he wanted to be social with his wife, but it would be between like 5 and 6, and that was it. And I don't know how sustainable that is for people. And I'm not even sure with the fasting too. Are your patients able to work, or they do that on a weekend day? And of course, that's when people want to socialize, because that becomes those implications as well.
Yeah, see, I don't believe that that's something that's sustainable for the long haul, but doing that 2 or 3 days a week is doable for most people. So I tell my patients, there's got to be some skin in the game. You have to make
Got it.
somewhere. For me, and for what the evidence supports, counting calories and weighing food is not a realistic way to live your life. So yeah, it's a big sacrifice to go that long without eating. But if you're hydrated, you should be able to work out. I mean, most of us are not training for the Tour de France here, so it's
Right.
on road every day.
Yeah.
So very simply, you can work out. I tell my patients to work out every opportunity that they have to work out, even if they're post fast. So most importantly is being hydrated. All right, your body. You will be able to work out and exercise. Maybe you won't be able to exercise at the level that you previously were, because obviously using fat as your source of fuel, or I shouldn't say.
Right.
But using your fat as your source of fuel is not nearly as efficient as using carbohydrate or glycogen stores.
Mm-hmm. One other thing too, in my work, 'cause I do a lot of functional and holistic medicine, is that I'm always worried about constipation with my patients, because I really feel that they don't get rid of toxins when they get constipated. Is that a problem with the fasting? Because I know, your system sort of kind of slows down and shuts down a little bit. One of the things that obviously helps you go to the bathroom is the stimulation of food into your gastrointestinal system. So is that an issue for your patients, or?
It is an issue for those who are dehydrated, first of all.
Okay.
For those who are on the medicines that we'll probably start talking about.
Yeah, within 2 minutes. Yeah, everybody's waiting. Yeah, waiting for this. Yeah.
On top of that, in general, I mean, it's really important to make the distinction between constipation and just not having as much food in your system and not go to the bathroom as frequently. So one is pathologic and one is, as you would expect,
physiologic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's get to what people want to know, because they're dying. They're on the edge of their seats. So I guess my first question to you is, and again, when you're seeing patients, I don't know if you start them on this regimen of the fasting and going over the right foods, but how do you determine, I mean, I'm sure it's a consensus, if a patient is a good candidate for one of these new weight loss medications? Do you bring it up to them, or a lot of times they're asking you, or it's a combination?
Well, first of all, a lot of people walk into my door with predetermined notions of how they want to lose their weight. So they tell me what they want, and they've done research.
Okay.
A lot of people come in and they're an open book, and they're just leaving it to me. And they let me tell, and my job is to let them know all of the tools that we have in the shed to get them to where they would like to be and where they should be.
Okay.
Medically. So I never bring up medicines with my patients. I've been doing weight loss medicine for a long time, long before this class
craze. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So my job is a lot harder just about 7 or 8 years ago. But now I talk about patients' lifestyle, and I try to make adjustments in their lifestyle. And I talk to them about the fasting. I talk to them about exercise programs. I check all of their vitamin levels. I check all their hormones, because a lot of folks who struggle with weight have hormonal deficiencies.
Right.
These patients have low testosterone. Hypothyroidism is common, right? Vitamin deficiency reduce people's energy levels, so they're not able to work out and function, at the capacity that they should be able to.
Right.
So I check all of these things when my patients first come in the door. I talk to them about lifestyle. I talk to them specifically about hydration and about fasting. I gauge their interest in it. And patients sometimes, when I tell them to not eat for 24 hours, they roll their eyes, and I know I'm not going to go far. So then I pivot, and one program is not this. There are plenty of ways to do this. And then I do tell them that these medicines do exist, and I write the medicines that I think they would be eligible for potentially. Should their insurance allow, and I send them home as part of their part of their program is for them to do their homework and read about it and see if they're interested. I don't have a high level discussion of the medicine on the first visit, because a lot of patients will look at it and say, absolutely no way, or I could do this on my own. But I think it's important to let people know that these drugs are out there, and they can help people get to their.
As you said, you've been around a long time. I can't remember, was it called phentermine or something? There was another drug that was used probably 2 decades ago, which people were taking. I don't know if it was based on like an amphetamine, but it turned out to be
fenfluramine.
Fenfluramine, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the fenfluramine component was the one that was associated with valve issues in the heart, and was still seeing patients requiring valve surgery on that basis. 20 years to 30 years. Phentermine sort of got a bad knock because it was guilt by association. The phentermine is still used in the field of weight loss medicine. It's a central acting, another central nervous system stimulant that suppresses appetite. Is still something that's used quite commonly. But yeah, that's one of the first drugs out there for weight loss.
Mm-hmm. Do you the whole idea of these what's it called, semi-glutenide medications, is that they affect insulin, or because apparently, from what I understand, they affect appetite again, so where people can go long periods without eating, which obviously maybe facilitate your fasting thing. Well, is that what's happening with these drugs? Is that how it works for diabetes? It just sort of stabilizes the blood sugar?
It works a little differently for diabetes. So the class of medicine is GLP-1 agonisms, and semaglutide is Ozempic or Wegovy, as we know, at different indications. And tirzepatide is the other one, that's Mounjaro or Zepbound for weight loss. So these are the same medicines used purposed differently for different indications. In regards to patients who have a glucose dysregulation or diabetes, these medicines work in a very specific fashion, or a couple of fashions, to improve diabetes. They allow the pancreas to make insulin in response to a meal. So they're lowering the glucose after a meal, and they also lower a hormone that comes from the pancreas called glucagon, which also raises sugar. So it's got two effects. It also slows the absorption of carbohydrates from the gut. So it makes your body absorb carbohydrates in a more easy fashion, and it allows for the body to process it. You don't get the same spikes after meals. The other effect it has on diabetics and non-diabetics is its effect on appetite. It works on the hindbrain to suppress the appetite. And very simply, patients who are on these medicines don't eat as much. So if you're obese or need to lose weight and you're non-diabetic, it's going to have that effect on you. It won't have the other effects on the pancreas, but it will have the effect to slow the gut, okay? So in which you could potentially get the side effects. And I think a lot of people are familiar with the side effects of these medicines, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that if you wouldn't mind. Because the only thing that I've heard, well, two things. One, that you have, because of I think the slowing of the gastric emptying, you have to be careful before procedures like endoscopies or obviously a surgery.
Sure.
Then there was the issue about suicidal ideation, which seemed to be debunked, from the FDA. Although I have to throw this out there, I'm still always really concerned about the FDA's ability to protect us, because on the front page of the New York Times yesterday was about Montelukast singular, which kind of falls into my area of allergy and asthma. And I knew for years, I wasn't that thrilled with it, because I'd heard that there was issues with young children possibly, having suicidal ideation and issues, and they kind of downplayed it. And now turns out there's a lot more than they realized. So what are you concerned about with these drugs, and then you have to tell patients to obviously, when giving them informed consent?
Sure. I mean, for these medicines, there's a black box warning, and that is for medullary thyroid cancer and pancreatitis. Okay. Now, in reality, the medullary thyroid cancer is something that happened in phase 1 clinical trials, which are the trials that are done in animals, rats and mice, before the drug came to market in humans. There's been no significant increase in those, but that said, I still have to have that discussion with the patient, and for medical legal reasons. And then the other black box is for pancreatitis. This is something, many drugs cause pancreatitis. There's pancreatitis associated with obesity because of gallstones, because of high triglyceride levels. So pancreatitis does happen more frequently in the obese population. But there was a couple of studies that suggest that there is a higher. Why would this cause pancreatitis? Because of the gallstones, or we don't know? No, we don't think it's because of the gallstones, but that's something else we should discuss, because there is a higher risk of gallstones in anyone who loses a lot of weight. Okay, so bariatric surgery patients who lose weight rapidly are prone to gallstones. Okay, so patients who take this class of medicine with an intensive lifestyle modification who lose a lot of weight in a short period of time are prone to gallstones. So gallstones are something that are that are in the picture and need to be monitored. Patients need to be monitored for that. And that very simply usually is manifest as abdominal pain in the right upper quadrant of the abdomen, typically after a meal. As far as those two major side effects, the pancreatitis and the medullary thyroid cancer, medullary thyroid cancer, I think, has sort of been, we're convinced that this is something that really happens in rats. Pancreatitis, I'll be honest, I've never seen it. I go to lectures all the time. I've given lectures on the topic all the time. I've never seen a case of pancreatitis from any of the drugs in this class. So it is something that we have to discuss with the patients. But it's not something that I'm really concerned about. What is important and is the effect that it has on your gut. Okay, so and all the press about this medicine has been this gastroparesis, the effect of it causing emergency room visits for patients for constipation and nausea and intractable vomiting. So, managing expectations when you give this medicine is of utmost importance. You need to tell the patient that when they start this medicine, that they more than likely will experience some degree of nausea, potentially constipation. Some patients can get diarrhea. So those are the most common. Reflux also, because of how the medicine works. The medicine very simply slows the emptying of the gut. So if you're from the esophagus all the way to your bottom, it's going to affect the transit time of food. So there's a higher risk of patients getting reflux in the beginning. Of course, when patients lose weight, that reflux gets better because there's less pressure on the abdomen. But in the beginning, patients do have symptoms: reflux, nausea, sometimes vomiting, constipation, sometimes diarrhea. So managing expectations and monitoring your patients who are on this medicine very carefully. So I get two calls from nurses at Mount Sinai every week from patients on this class of medicine that were given the medicine by their trainer or by their dermatologist.
Right. Yeah, I know.
They don't have a whole lot of experience managing or preparing the patient for what's in store. And those are the patients who are either they got the wrong dose or they weren't prepared or they didn't understand what their symptoms were coming from. And they end up in the emergency room. And this is why the medicine is really getting some bad press. I mean, we know about the good press and it's very
What about the mental health issues? Is there any kind of, in your experience, issues with mood changes or anything of serious
I mean, if you look at the depression index, and the different ways to measure depression, when people lose weight, they're happier, right? Of course, medicine can have a direct effect. I think there was a couple of studies that suggested there was a higher risk of suicidal ideations. As you mentioned earlier, I think they've been debunked. I don't know of any study recently that suggested that was still something. Mental health, I can't tell you the first thing that happens to my patients as they feel a sense of liberty, that they finally have control. Like I mentioned earlier, I consider this almost like a psychiatric medicine. Patients, their depression is improved. Their quality of life is improved. The first thing that happens to them is they sleep better, right? Their partners will tell them they snore less. They wake up rested. And when that happens, almost every aspect of your life improves. And metabolics improve. We all know that, sleep deprivation leads to hypertension and cholesterol issues and even insulin resistance. So when sleep is improved, and which is one of the first things that happens with this medicine with the first 10 or 15 pounds for most patients, is that the quality of their life improves. So in my experience, anecdotally speaking, I've seen nothing but improvements in my patients' quality of life and pretty much every aspect of their health, mentally and otherwise.
So do the gastric bypass surgeons have to be concerned here? Is business going to go down? I mean,
most of the gastric bypass surgeons that I know are now adopting programs like this in their practice.
Well, after they do the surgery, they do the surgery and then they give the people the drugs?
I give, most people, so with bariatric...
what makes it was, vice versa. Did you say, let's do a trial of Ozempic or Mounjaro? Or did the doctor say, okay, we got to do the surgery and then to keep you this, we'll put you on these drugs. Which comes first?
So typically, patients are on a liquid diet before the surgery, and anytime you can lose weight, if you're obese, before surgery is going to lower your operative risk, wound healing, anesthetic risk, and other risks. Right. So I always talk to patients about lifestyle, and even if they've committed the bariatric surgery, I still work with them and I want them to be prepared for what's coming on the other side of it. I have some patients who are scheduled for surgery. They come in and they lose 15 pounds and they just stay with the program. And sometimes they get close to their target weight without the scars. Nice. So I have lots of patients that's happened to. So yeah, I mean, I think bariatric surgery is something that's falling off a bit because
it's a dangerous surgery. The other thing I've seen in my practice, again, doing the holistic functional side of our practice, I see a lot of vitamin and mineral deficiencies after the those surgeries. Their body, the intestinal absorption is not good, and they run into problems. They don't feel good, some of them, even though they're thinner, their iron is very low, their B12 and magnesium. That's why I use a lot of sublingual. I try to bypass the whole lower intestinal tract to try to get or we'll do injections to try to, maintain that. Is that the same problem? The Mounjaro or Ozempic affects vitamin absorption? No.
Well, I mean, patients generally have a more restrictive diet because they very simply can't eat much. So there's, so I monitor my patients very frequently. But with the changes in the gut from even gastric sleeve, there are multiple vitamin deficiencies. Certainly calcium, iron, B12, vitamin D. That need to be repleted. With the drugs, you don't see this as much, but there can be because, again, patients generally have a more restricted diet than they had. They simply can't get the same amount of calories in the same spectrum of food that they were previously getting.
Let me ask you, I would say it's the $1 million question, but it's really the $1,000 a month question. Patients want to know, even though it was written in the Wall Street Journal, there was a journalist who went on Mounjaro, and he talked about how, they showed the before and after picture. He lost like 50 pounds. He was feeling really good. But he said, I can't afford this at $1,000 a month. So, of course, patients are petrified. What happens when I come off this medicine? So what, again, in your experience, is there an end in sight where you think, once they've reached their target weight, they can come off of it? And by you having a program for them, they can maintain, where they are, or are there problems?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, Dean, my patient, no one gets the medicine without having some skin in the game. So they need to show me that they can practice some form of restriction. Okay. So my patients most of them do the fasting. My patients do not gain that weight back. They take it off. If you look at the data on these medicine in general, patients mostly gain the weight back because they're not on a particular program. Of course, when they did studies, they had them followed with dietitians, but no one follows caloric restriction for the long haul. So my patients need to demonstrate to me that they can do something with structure that will allow them to maintain the weight once it comes off. And my patients lose weight much more rapidly than patients, if you look at the studies, who just take the medicines because they're doing the medicine as an adjunct to the lifestyle being the mainstay. So in regards to access to the medicine, this is a big issue, and these medicines are extremely expensive. Not everyone has the insurance coverage, right? So there are now, there's, again, semaglutide, which has got Ozempic for diabetes, the indication for diabetes, and Wegovy for the indication for obesity. And then there's tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro for diabetes, and now just about 6 weeks ago got the approval in the form of the same exact chemical, and it's called Zepbound, but the same dose for weight loss. So if the patient is diabetic, you can, put the prescription through and hope for the best that there isn't too much of an authorization process and hope the patient will be covered for it. Most patients with diabetes, with any type of insurance, are covered for either Ozempic.
Indefinitely, though, or does the insurance company, like a lot of things the insurance company does, say, okay, you could be on this for 2 months, but you got to, because obviously diabetes is a chronic disease. Do they, in general, not cover it for a long period of time, or it really is a case by case, I guess?
They typically covered for a year. So you do the authorization, covered for a year, right? And then the other end of it is the patients who don't have diabetes. So now getting them covered is a little bit more difficult. So a lot of insurances are finally waking up to the fact that getting some weight off the patient now will save them a lot of money on in the long term. So,
will Medicare pay for this? I'm just curious, like for elderly people?
Medicare will not pay for weight loss medicine. So they'll pay for Ozempic,
diabetes.
They'll pay for the Mounjaro, but not the Zepbound. Medicaid does not pay for it either. So commercial insurances are becoming, again, they're waking up and they're starting to cover these medicines. And I tell my patients, if they weren't covered on December 31st, that they should call their insurance and find out if they're covered on January 1st, because like I said, more and more insurances are starting to wake up and understand that these medicines, especially now that there's cardiovascular risk reduction data in the obese population that's non-diabetic and in the obese population with diabetes, that there is cardiovascular data that shows that there is benefit. So more insurances are picking this up. It is a process for the doctor. I'm in solo practice. I do my own prior authorizations. I have to fill out paperwork. They get denied. I write letters of medical necessity to my patients. I have to document what the patient has done in the past and what they failed, what medicine they're failed. There are certain criteria that you need to prove to the insurance company before they will approve it. So it is a process, and it's a labor of love. It really is.
Yeah, no, you sound like a terrific advocate for your patients. One other question before we kind of get to the conclusion, on your program with your patients, whatever, are they allowed to have a pizza and beer day once in a while, or they'll say it's my birthday,
one of the most important. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Is there always, do they get that holiday, treat once in a while, or how does that work?
Absolutely, life is.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We're trying to prolong it, but life is short in general, and you need to enjoy your birthdays and your kids' birthdays, and you need to enjoy your slice of pizza. My patients, when they go on vacation, when my patients go to Paris, I stop the medicines a week before they go. So I want them to enjoy life. So this is a pragmatic, practical approach to long-term weight loss, and you need to be able to enjoy life. So always being on your game and eating the right thing, vegetables and lean proteins, is really no way to go through life, in my estimation.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. It's practical, and again, it's the question I get from my patients. I deal again in a lot of patients with what's called chronic candida overgrowth, and a lot of them are on extreme diets. And they're always like, when am I going to be able to come off of this? Or can I have this for my birthday? And I'm like, yes, enjoy your life. If you can be good 80, 90% of the time, the other 10%, we'll work around that.
I tell my patients, never eat broken glass. Everything else is on the table.
All right, that sounds good. All right, so as we wrap up, my last two things I'm going to say is, if you can, Dr. Rabito, what is the single most important tip you could give to a person who says, I want to lose weight this year, 2024? Aside from finding the right doctor.
You want the truth? They should.
Yes.
They should call me.
Well, that's what we're going to get to. Okay, that makes sense.
No. The answer, Dean, is to find someone who will be, and you mentioned the word advocate, to be an advocate for them.
The coach. I mean, that's what I say to my patients, by the way, all the time too. I said, what I can do for you, the information is all out there, but we all need mentors and coaches, and a doctor, as much as we have a medical license, that is, I think, important part of our job, which I think you brought out, and I like to think I do as well. So I think that is a great tip. Find the right person to work with. That's what this podcast is all about. So I'd like to give a handoff to you, Dr. Rabito. How can people, if they're interested in, your practice and what you're doing, how do they find you?
Well, sure. My name is Philip Rabito. It's spelled Rabito, and my practice is on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Interestingly enough, with COVID, my practice has exploded because now insurances cover telemedicine. So I have patients that live in Italy, France, and Israel. Nice. I've never met before, and what I do is counseling. So my office number is 877-703-3775. And, of course, not everyone's going to have access to an advocate. So if I could say one other thing, if you could find something in your life that you can do consistently, and I recommend 2 days of fasting. I tell my patients when they sit down with me for the first time, I said, I hope I see you next week. But if I don't, if you just follow what I tell you right now, and I talk about those 2 longer fasts, you will have success eventually in the long term. So I think having some sort of plan, some sort of sacrifice, even if it's for a couple of days out of the week for a long period of time, you will lose weight slowly and do it in such a way that you can sustain that weight loss.
That's great advice. So, Dr. Rabito, thank you for joining us today. I think the listeners have gotten a lot of important information to think about and discuss with their trusted healthcare practitioner.